I can't lose again, I swore. The dealer proved me wrong and I pawned my laptop. My name is Alexander. I'm a graphic designer who used to solve problems with pixels and deadlines. Now I solve them with borrowed time and empty pockets. 3 days ago, I had rent money and a plan. I had skills, tools, and a laptop full of 3 years' worth of client work. I thought I was different from the people who haunt casino floors at midnight. I had charts, strategies, and mathematics on my side. I wasn't gambling. I was investing in a sure thing. The first hour felt like vindication. The dealer's cards fell my way, and my stack grew taller. But casinos don't stay in business by losing to smart guys with systems. The wins stopped. The losses mounted. And somewhere between my second drink and my third trip to the ATM, I became the exact person I swore I'd never be. When you're holding your last valuable possession across from a pawn shop owner who's seen 1,000 desperate faces just like yours, what's really for sale? Your laptop? Or your future? I can't lose again, I swore. The dealer proved me wrong and I pawned my laptop. That's how this story ends. But it starts 3 days earlier, on a Tuesday night in my studio apartment. With an eviction notice that might as well have been a death sentence I found it slipped under my door when I got home from another failed client meeting. White paper, official letterhead, my name spelled correctly in block letters. Alexander Whitmore. 72 hours to pay $2,400 or get out. The math was simple and brutal. I sat at my kitchen table, really just a card table I'd bought at Goodwill when I first moved in, and opened my laptop. The screen lit up my face in the dark apartment. I'd been putting off checking my bank balance for 3 days, the way you avoid looking at a wound. $847.23. I stared at those numbers until they blurred. Rent was $1,850 a month, plus late fees that had been piling up like snow. 3 months behind, ever since Brennan Marketing disappeared without paying my biggest invoice. $3,200 for a logo redesign and brand package that took me 6 weeks to perfect. Gone, along with the company itself. Their office had a for lease sign in the window. Now.my phone buzzed. A text from my landlord. Need to talk. Tomorrow 9 a.m. Mr. Kowalski. A decent guy who spoke with a Polish accent and always asked about my work when he saw me in the hallway. He'd been patient, more patient than he should have been. But patience has limits, and I'd hit his dot. I closed the laptop and walked to my window. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian, and I could see the bus stop across the street. Route 47. I knew where it went because Jake, my old college roommate, had taken it 2 years ago on the night he turned $200 into $1,800. Basic strategy, he told me over beers the next weekend. It's not really gambling if you know what you're doing. I'd laughed at him then, called him lucky, said casinos don't stay in business by letting people win with systems. But standing there in my dark apartment, with an eviction notice on my table and $847 in my account, Jake's words didn't sound so crazy anymore that I picked up my phone to call my parents in Sacramento. My thumb hovered over Mom's contact photo, her and Dad at my college graduation, both smiling like I'd just solved world hunger with my graphic design degree. The phone rang once. Twice that I hung up. They'd already bailed me out once. 2 years ago when I'd quit my agency job to go freelance. That loan had taken 18 months to repay and came with weekly check-in calls that felt like parole meetings. I couldn't do that again. Couldn't admit that their responsible son with the business plan and the backup savings had screwed up this badly. I opened my laptop again and typed Blackjack Basic Strategy into Google. The first result was a chart covered in letters and numbers. Hit on 16 against dealers 7. Stand on 17 or higher. Double down on 11 against anything but an ace. It looked like a cheat code, a way to turn chaos into order. I clicked deeper. Forums full of people talking about advantage play and beating the house. Math that showed blackjack had the lowest house edge of any casino game if you played it right. Stories of professionals who made their living at the tables. One post caught my eye. Turned my last $500 into $3,000 last night. Basic strategy works if you stick to it. I bookmarked the page. Outside my window, the Route 47 bus pulled up to the stop. A few passengers got off, collar workers heading home from late shifts. The bus sat there for a moment, doors open, waiting. Then it pulled away, disappearing around the corner toward downtown. Toward Riverside Casino. I looked at my bank balance one more time. $847.23. Not enough to save my apartment, but maybe enough to save my life. If I was smart, if I studied, if I treated it like the skill-based game the forums said it was. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from a potential client, asking for a quote on a small job. I opened it, read the details, started typing a response. Then I stopped. Even if I landed this project, even if they paid immediately, it wouldn't be enough. And if they were like Brennan Marketing, if they just vanished, I'd be right back here in a month. I deleted the draft email and closed my laptop. The eviction notice sat on my table like a countdown timer. 72 hours to find a miracle. I thought about Jake's story again, about the charts and strategies, about the mathematical certainty that skill could overcome luck. Maybe it wasn't really gambling if you knew what you were doing. The knock came at exactly 9 a.m. 3 sharp raps that I'd been dreading since I woke up. Mr. Kowalski stood in my doorway holding a manila folder and wearing the expression of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. He was shorter than me, maybe 65, with thick gray hair and work-worn hands that had probably built half the improvements in this building. "Alexander," he said, stepping inside when I opened the door wider. "We need to talk." I'd been up since 6, stress cleaning my apartment and rehearsing conversations that all ended the same way. Mr. Kowalski settled into my only chair while I leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to look casual instead of terrified. "I don't want to do this," he said, opening the folder. "You're a good tenant. Quiet, respectful. But I got 4 properties, Alexander. For mortgages. The bank doesn't care that you're a nice guy." I nodded, not trusting my voice. 3 months, he continued. "I carried you 3 months because I thought things would turn around. Your business would pick up. But now," he pulled out a form with official letterhead. Legal terms I didn't want to understand. "I file this tomorrow. Eviction starts Monday. Unless," the word hung in the air like a lifeline. "Unless what?" "You bring me $1,000. Today. Not the full amount. I know you don't have it. But 1,000 shows me you're serious. Shows me you got a plan that's more than just hoping." $1,000. I had $847, but he didn't know that. "If you can do that," he continued, "I give you until the end of the month. Full balance, plus late fees. After that," he shrugged, "after that, I can't help you anymore." I walked to my window, pretending to think it over. The Route 47 bus was pulling up across the street again. Different passengers this time, but the same route. The same destination. "Can I have until tonight?" I asked. "To get the money together?" Mr. Kowalski studied my face. "You got it? Really got it?" I met his eyes. "I'm working on something. A big project. Payment comes through today." The lie felt smooth, practiced, like I'd been preparing for it. "Tonight," he said, standing up. "But Alexander, if you're just buying time to skip out on me, I'm not going anywhere." He left the folder on my counter. "I hope not. I really do." After he left, I sat alone with the eviction paperwork and my own reflection in my laptop screen. The big project. Payment coming through today. Where had that story come from? It sounded so believable, so specific, that for a moment I almost believed it myself. I opened my phone and started to call my parents again. This time I made it to the 3rd ring before hanging up. What would I tell them? That their son with the college degree and the business plan was about to be homeless? That he'd lied to his landlord about imaginary clients and imaginary payments? My phone buzzed with a text from my college friend Sarah. "Coffee this week? Haven't heard from you in forever." I stared at the message. Sarah worked at a tech startup downtown, had a nice apartment, probably didn't even think about rent until the automatic payment went through. We used to grab drinks every few weeks, back when I could afford drinks. Back when I had stories to tell that didn't involve debt and desperation. I typed back. "Super busy with work this week. Rain check." Another lie. Easier than admitting I was too broke for a $4 coffee. I opened my laptop and went back to the blackjack sites I'd bookmarked last night. The strategy charts looked more complex in daylight, but the math was still there. House edge under 1% for skilled players. Possible to win consistently with proper bankroll management and discipline. I found a practice site and started playing for free. Hit, stand, double down, split. The decisions became automatic after a while. Win some, lose some, but over time the algorithm favored correct play. After an hour, I was up $300 in pretend money. It felt like a sign. I checked my bank balance again. $847.23. I needed $1,000 for Mr. Kowalski, which meant I needed to turn $847 into at least $1,000, a profit of $153 or more. Basic math said that was totally achievable with the right approach. I looked up Riverside Casino online. They opened at noon on weekdays. Table minimums started at $15 for blackjack. With conservative betting and solid strategy, I could probably turn my $847 into $1,000 in a couple of hours. Then I could pay Mr. Kowalski, buy myself time, and figure out a real solution. Maybe land that project Sarah had mentioned. Maybe find new clients to replace Sprint and marketing. Maybe get back on my feet. The Route 47 schedule showed buses every 30 minutes. The next one left at 11:45, which would get me to the casino right when they opened. Perfect timing. I closed my laptop and went to take a shower. The public library on 5th Street had the fastest internet in town, and by Thursday afternoon, I was camping there like a graduate student cramming for finals. I checked out every gambling book on the shelf, all 3 of them, and had 20 browser tabs open on basic strategy, card counting, and bankroll management. The math was elegant, almost beautiful. Blackjack wasn't like roulette or slots, where the house always had a fixed edge. It was a game where knowledge mattered. Hit soft 17 against dealer's ace, I muttered, copying numbers onto index cards. Stand on hard 12 against dealer's 4, 5, or 6. The woman at the computer next to me kept glancing over. I probably looked insane, surrounded by printouts and scribbling on cards like I was planning a heist. In a way, I guess I was. I'd found a forum called Advantage Play Central where people shared strategies and success stories. Screen names like Card Counter 21 and Vegas Pro discussing wonging and true count and penetration in ways that sounded like a foreign language. But buried in all the jargon were stories that gave me hope. Went to Foxwoods with $800. Left with $2,100. Basic strategy is mathematically sound if you have the discipline to stick with it. 3-hour session last night. Started with $500. Cashed out at $1,847. The key is never deviating from the chart, no matter what your gut tells you. These weren't degenerate gamblers throwing money away. These were smart people treating blackjack like a part-time job, like a skill that could be learned and perfected. I downloaded a basic strategy chart and printed it on the library's printer for 25 cents. The paper was still warm when I folded it and slipped it into my wallet. My backup plan, in case I forgot the rules under pressure. At 3 p.m., I took a break and walked outside to call Mr. Kowalski. He answered on the second ring. The payment, I said. It's definitely coming through today. My client just confirmed it. Good, he said, but I could hear doubt in his voice. What time tonight? Bank transfer usually posts around 6. I'll have the cash to you by 7. Okay, Alexander. 7 o'clock. Don't make me wait. The confidence in my voice surprised me. I sounded like someone who actually had a plan, not someone whose entire future depended on memorizing a chart of letters and numbers. Back inside, I found a blackjack simulator and started practicing. The free version let me play with unlimited fake money, which was perfect for testing strategies without risk. I set my virtual bankroll to $850 and my bet size to $25, trying to mirror the real situation I'd face tomorrow. First session. Turned $850 into $1,200 in 43 hands. Second session. Lost it all in 67 hands when I got impatient and started betting $50. Third session. Steady $25 bets, strict adherence to basic strategy. Finished with $180. The pattern was clear. Discipline worked. Patience worked. The system worked. As long as I didn't get greedy or emotional. I practiced until the library closed at 8, playing hundreds of hands until the decisions became automatic. Hit 16 against dealer's 7. Double down on 11 against dealer's 6. Split aces always. Split 8s always, never split 10s. Walking home, I passed the bus stop where Route 47 picked up passengers. There was a schedule posted behind scratch plexiglass. Buses ran every 30 minutes until midnight, then hourly until 6 a.m. The casino never closed. I thought about Jake's story again. How he'd walked in with $200 and walked out with $1,800. How he'd made it sound so simple, so inevitable. Like the casino was just a place where math worked in your favor. If you were smart enough to understand IT to AT home, I spread my index cards across the kitchen table and reviewed them one more time. Basic strategy for hard hands, soft hands, pairs. The proper responses to every possible combination of player cards versus dealer up card. It was like learning a new language, except this language could save my apartment. My phone rang. Mom's contact photo filled the screen, her and Dad at my graduation again, both looking so proud. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message. Hi, honey, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. Give us a call when you get a chance. Love you. Her voice sounded worried. Parents have a radar for when their kids are struggling, even from 200 miles away. But I couldn't call her back. Not yet. Not until I had good news to share. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and laid out clothes for tomorrow. Business casual, khakis, and a button-down shirt that would help me blend in with the legitimate gamblers, the people who could afford to be there. I wanted to look like someone who belonged at a casino on a weekday morning, not someone making a desperate last stand. Before bed, I practiced the basic strategy charts one more time, covering the answers with my hand and testing myself. What do you do with 15 against dealer's 10? Hit. What about ace, 7 against dealer's 9? Hit. Pair of 9s against dealer's 7? Split. I was getting them all right that I fell asleep with the cards scattered around me, dreaming of neat stacks of chips and the sound of shuffling decks. In my dream, I was confident and calm, making perfect decisions while the dealer smiled and pushed pile after pile of winnings across the green felt. When I woke up, it would be Friday. Game day. I woke up at 2 a.m. with basic strategy charts stuck to my face. The index cards had scattered across my pillow during the night, and one was literally glued to my cheek with drool. Real professional. I peeled it off and squinted at the numbers in the dark. Hit soft 18 against dealer's 9, 10, or ace. Even half asleep, I knew the answer. I couldn't get back to sleep. My mind kept running scenarios, calculating probabilities, rehearsing the plan. Get to the casino at noon when it opens. Start with $25 bets. Play perfect basic strategy. Turn $847 into $1,000. Pay Mr. Kowalski. By time to figure out the rest of my life. By 6 a.m., I'd reorganized the cards into neat piles and was running practice drills. I'd taped the most important ones to my bathroom mirror so I could review them while brushing my teeth. Hit 16 against 7 through ace. Stand on 17 or higher. Double down on 11 against anything except ace. The shower felt like a ritual, washing away the desperation and panic of the last few days. When I got out, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone different. Not the broke graphic designer who'd been avoiding phone calls and eating ramen for dinner. Someone with a plan. Someone who'd done his homework. That I dressed carefully. Khakis, blue button-down, brown leather shoes that weren't too fancy but weren't falling apart either. The goal was to look like I belonged there, like I could afford to lose whatever I was betting. Confidence was part of the strategy, according to the forums. Casinos watched for desperate players, people betting their last dollar. They'd rather deal with calm, methodical gamblers who tipped well and didn't cause scenes than I had coffee and toast, trying to eat normally despite my stomach feeling like it was full of live wires. The eviction notice was still on my counter, but it felt less threatening now. By tonight, it would be irrelevant. By tonight, I'd have Mr. Kowalski's money and a path forward. I checked my bank balance one more time. $847.23. In 6 hours. If everything went according to plan, it would be over $1,000 at 11:30. I grabbed my wallet, made sure the strategy chart was folded inside, and headed for the door. The Route 47 was already pulling up to the stop across the street that I took the stairs 2 at a time, practically jogging to catch it. The driver was a middle-aged woman who barely looked up when I fed my fare into the machine. I found a seat near the back and watched the city roll past through scratched windows that we passed strip malls and gas stations, apartment complexes and office buildings. Normal Thursday morning traffic, people heading to normal jobs where they earned predictable paychecks and went home to apartments they could afford. In 20 minutes. I'd be one of them again. The Riverside Casino looked bigger in person than it had online. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, taking it in. The building was massive and windowless, covered in flashing neon signs that promised jackpots and good times. Even at noon on a Thursday, the parking lot was half full. Retirees, shift workers, people like me who had nowhere else to be. The automatic doors whooshed open and hit me with a wall of sound. Slot machines chirping and dinging, the mechanical shuffle of cards, dozens of conversations blending into white noise. The carpet was an assault of burgundy and gold swirls that seemed designed to make you dizzy. No windows anywhere, no clocks, nothing to remind you that time existed outside this fluorescent bubble. That I walked toward the cashier cage, trying to look casual. The woman behind the bulletproof glass had bright pink hair and nails to match. She smiled when I approached. "How much today, honey?" "800, I said, pulling out my debit card. The transaction felt official, legitimate, like buying groceries or paying for gas. She counted out chips in neat stacks, mostly green $25 chips with a few red $5s mixed in. They felt heavier than I'd expected, substantial in a way that made the money seem more real, not less. "Good luck," she said, sliding them through the slot. The blackjack section was in the center of the casino floor, 6 tables arranged in a semicircle. Most were empty this early in the day, but I could see dealers preparing their stations, shuffling cards, and arranging chips. I chose table 3, where a middle-aged woman with graying hair was just settling in behind the dealer position. Her name tag read Linda. She looked up when I approached, offering the kind of professional smile that said she'd done this thousands of times before. "Good afternoon," she said. "First time at Riverside?" "First time anywhere," I admitted, taking the seat directly across from her. "Well, welcome. I'm Linda. Been dealing here for 8 years, so if you have any questions, just ask." I placed a green chip in the betting circle. "Just basic blackjack, right? No side bets or anything complicated. Just you against me," she said, dealing 2 cards face up to my spot and 1 face up, 1 face down to herself. "You got 16, I'm showing a 7. I looked at my cards, a 10 and a 6, then at the strategy chart I'd memorized. Hit 16 against dealers 7 through ace. No hesitation, no gut feelings. Just math. "Hit," I said. She dealt me a 4. 20. A winner. "Nice hit," Linda said, flipping her whole card to reveal a 10. 17. She pushed a green chip across to me. "First hand, first win." It felt like validation, like the universe confirming that I'd made the right choice. I'd doubled my initial bet in 30 seconds using nothing but proper strategy and discipline. "Let's go again," I said, placing another $25 chip in the circle. This time I got blackjack, ace of spades, jack of hearts. Linda whistled appreciatively and paid me $37.50. 2 hands in, I was already up $62.50. Other players started joining the table. An older man in a John Deere cap who kept asking Linda about her weekend plans. A woman in scrubs who was probably between shifts at the hospital. They played loose, making decisions based on hunches and superstitions, splitting 10s, and standing on soft 17s, that I watched them make mistake after mistake while I played by the book. Hit, stand, double down, split. Every decision calculated and precise. By the end of my first hour, I was up $110. My $800 had become $910, and I was playing with perfect confidence. This wasn't gambling. This was applied mathematics. Linda dealt another round, and I felt like I'd found my calling. "You've been studying," Linda said, dealing me a pair of 8s. She was right. It showed in every decision I made, every split and double down that followed the strategy charts exactly. I'd been playing for 90 minutes and hadn't made a single mistake. "Split," I said, placing another $25 chip next to my original bet. The other players at the table had come and gone, but I'd stayed put. Consistent betting, perfect strategy, steady profits. I was up $180 now. My $800 had become $980. Just 20 more dollars, and I'd have Mr. Kowalski's money. Linda dealt me a 10 on the first 8, then a 3 on the second. 18 and 11. I doubled down on the 11, putting out another $25. She gave me a 9. 20. Both hands won when she busted with a 6 showing and pulled a 10, then another 10. "Nice playing," she said, pushing $125 in chips across the table to me. I was at $1,105. Mission accomplished. The smart move would have been to cash out right then. Walk to the cage, convert the chips back to money, drive to Mr. Kowalski's office, and hand him $1,000 cash. Problem solved, crisis averted. Instead, I stacked my chips and watched Linda shuffle the cards. The thing about winning is that it feels inevitable when it's happening. Every correct decision gets rewarded. Every risk pays off. You start to believe that the universe has recognized your intelligence and is finally giving you what you deserve. A new player sat down 2 seats to my left. Expensive suit, gold watch, the kind of confidence that comes from serious money. He bought in for $500 and immediately started betting $100 per hand. Craig, he said, introducing himself to Linda. I watched him play for a few hands. He made moves that violated basic strategy, but somehow kept winning. Split 10s against a dealer's 6. Doubled down on 12. Hit on 18 and caught a 3. Every violation of proper play got rewarded with a pile of chips. You've got to be willing to take risks, he said to me after winning another hand. Cards don't care about your charts and systems. He was wrong, of course. Luck might work in the short term, but math always won in the long run. Still, watching him turn $500 into $1,300 in 20 minutes made my own conservative approach feel timid. When Craig cashed out and left, I increased my bet to $50. I had over $1,000 now, which meant I could afford to be more aggressive. The math still worked. Basic strategy was basic strategy regardless of bet size, that I won the first hand at $50. Then the second. By the third hand, I was betting $75, riding the wave of confidence that comes from being right about everything. Linda dealt me a hard 20, king and queen. She was showing a 5. Automatic winner, no decision required. She flipped her whole card. Another 5. Then drew a 6 and a 5. 21. House wins, she said, pulling my $75 bet into her chip rack. That IT was just one hand. Variance. The kind of statistical noise that the forums had warned me about. I placed another $75 bet and got ready for the next round. That's when I noticed Linda's expression had changed. The professional smile was still there, but something in her eyes was different. She was watching me more carefully now, paying attention to my betting patterns in a way she hadn't before. "How long have you been playing?" she asked while dealing the next hand. "Couple hours," I said. "Why?" "Just curious. You seem like you know what you're doing." I didn't know what I was doing. That was the whole point. That Craig's empty chair seemed to mock me. He'd walked away with $1,800, turning $500 into a small fortune in less than 30 minutes. Meanwhile, I'd been grinding away with perfect basic strategy for 2 hours and was barely ahead of where he'd started. The math said I was right. Conservative betting, disciplined play, long-term thinking. But Craig's pile of chips had said something different. Sometimes you had to take risks to make real money. That I increased my bet to $100. If I was going to play at this level, I might as well play like I meant it. The cards came fast. Win, lose, win, lose. Each hand felt more important than the last. At $100 per bet, I could make or lose significant money in just a few minutes. The $25 bets that had felt so careful and methodical now seemed like a waste of time. Linda's dealing rhythm stayed the same, but I caught her glancing at my chip stack between hands. I was down to $950, still ahead of my starting point, but the comfortable cushion I'd built up was disappearing. "Maybe take a break," she suggested. "Get some lunch, walk around a bit." "I'm fine," I said, placing another $100 bet. This time I got 11 against her 6. Perfect doubling situation. I put out another $100, making it a $200 hand. She dealt me a 9. 20. She was showing 6 and would probably bust. She flipped a king. 16. Then drew a 5. 21. House wins, Linda said, pulling $200 away from me. I was down to $750. Below my starting bankroll for the first time all day. A new player joined the table, an elderly man who moved slowly and bet carefully. He reminded me of my grandfather, methodical and patient. He played basic strategy too, but with $10 bets that wouldn't bankrupt him if things went wrong. I watched him play for a few hands, winning some and losing some, never getting excited about either outcome. It should have been a reminder to slow down, to return to my original plan. Instead, it made me feel embarrassed about my cautious approach. I'd come here to solve a problem, to turn $847 into $1,000 and buy myself time. Betting $10 or $25 wasn't going to get me there fast enough. The clock was ticking. Mr. Kowalski expected his money at 7 o'clock. That I placed a $150 bet. Go big or go home. The cards were cruel. I got 13 against Linda's 10. Basic strategy said hit, so I hit. Bust. Another $150 gone, $600 left. I'd lost $247 in less than 30 minutes. My phone bust. Text message from Mr. Kowalski. Reminder, 7 p.m. tonight. Don't forget. I looked at the time. It was already 3:15. I'd been playing for over 3 hours without realizing it. The casino's timeless environment had swallowed the afternoon that I needed to win back what I'd lost, and I needed to do it fast. The elderly man next to me was still grinding away with his $10 bets, slowly building a small profit. But slow and steady wasn't going to save my apartment that I pulled out my phone and checked my bank balance. $47.23. I'd brought most of my money to the casino in cash, but there was still some left in checking. The ATM was across the room, past the slot machines and near the sports book. A quick walk to get reinforcements, then back to the table to finish what I'd started. Linda was dealing to the old man when I stood up. "Taking a break?" she asked. "Just need to grab something," I said. "Hold my seat." She nodded, but the look in her eyes suggested she'd seen this movie before. Players who started conservative and slowly ramped up their bets. Players who went to the ATM when they were losing. Players who weren't really in control, no matter how much they'd studied. The ATM felt like confessing to a crime. I stood in front of the machine for a full minute before inserting my card, watching other gamblers flow past me toward their own versions of hope and desperation. The screen asked how much I wanted to withdraw. I had $47 left in checking, but I could pull from my emergency fund, the savings account I'd sworn I'd never touch except for true disasters. This qualified, didn't it? I withdrew $500. The machine dispensed crisp 20s that smelled like possibility and poor choices in equal measure. Walking back to Linda's table, I felt the weight of the cash in my pocket like a second chance. The old man had left, replaced by a younger guy in a polo shirt who was betting erratically and drinking something that looked like whiskey. Linda dealt him a hand, then looked up when I sat back down. "Welcome back," she said. "Ready to continue?" I exchanged the $500 for chips and placed a $75 bet. Conservative compared to the $150 disasters, but still aggressive enough to make back my losses quickly. 3 hands later, I was down to $400. The cards had turned cold in ways that felt personal. Every marginal decision went against me. Every close call favored the house. I doubled down on 11 and caught a 2. I split 8s and got a 3 and a 4. Linda kept pulling 20 and 21 like she was reading from a script. "Rough stretch," she said, dealing another hand. "Happens to everyone. But it wasn't supposed to happen to me. I'd done the research. I'd learned the math. I was playing perfect basic strategy, making every decision by the book. The forums had promised that skill would overcome luck in the long run. How long was the long run? I increased my bet to $100, then $125, trying to accelerate my way out of the hole. The whiskey drinker next to me kept making conversation, asking about my job and whether I came here often. I gave short answers and tried to focus on the cards that my chip stack dwindled. $300, $200, $100. I pulled out my phone to check the time. 4:47 p.m. Mr. Kowalski expected his money in 2 hours and 13 minutes. I had $100 in chips and maybe enough left in my savings account for one more withdrawal. The smart move would have been to quit. Take the loss, go home, call my parents, admit I needed help, swallow my pride, and ask for a loan to cover rent. It would be humiliating, but it would solve the immediate problem. Instead, I placed my last $100 on the table. Linda dealt me a 19. Strong hand, almost certainly a winner. She was showing a 6, which meant she'd probably bust. She flipped her whole card, a 5. 11 total. Then drew a 10. 20-1. My last chip disappeared into her rack that I sat at the empty spot for a moment, staring at the felt where my chips used to be. The whiskey drinker had moved to another table. Linda was shuffling cards for the next player, maintaining her professional demeanor even though she'd just watched me lose my entire bankroll. "Tough session," she said quietly. "It happens. Cards don't always cooperate, even when you're playing correctly." Playing correctly. The phrase felt like a sick joke. I'd followed every rule, made every decision by the book, and still lost everything. All that studying, all those strategy charts, all that confidence in the mathematics of advantage play, worthless. That I walked back to the ATM, moving like I was underwater. This time I didn't hesitate. I withdrew another $300, the last of my emergency fund. Money that was supposed to be for car repairs and medical bills and actual emergencies. Losing my apartment was an emergency, right? Linda's expression changed when I sat back down with fresh chips. The professional smile stayed in place, but something in her eyes suggested concern. Or maybe pity. You sure about this? She asked. I'm sure, I said, placing a $50 bet, but I wasn't sure about anything anymore. Linda dealt slower now that I could feel her watching me between hands. The way she'd glance at my chips and then at my face, looking for signs I couldn't see myself. She'd started making conversation too, asking about the weather, commenting on my good plays, suggesting I might want to grab dinner that I recognized it from the forums. Dealer intervention tactics for problem gamblers. But I wasn't a problem gambler. I was just having a bad run of cards. You work around here? Linda asked, dealing me a soft 17 against her 9. Graphic designer, I said, hitting the soft 17 and catching a 3. 20. Finally, a decent hand. She flipped a jack. 19. I won $50. Freelance? She asked. Yeah, it's feast or famine, you know. I was back up to $250 after an hour of grinding. Small wins, careful bets, strict adherence to basic strategy. The system was working again, just like it was supposed to. Just like the math promised. I bet, Linda said. Creative work is tough. Irregular income. She was being kind, making human conversation to remind me that I was a person with a life outside this table. But I didn't want to be reminded. I wanted to focus on the cards, on the decisions, on getting back to even so I could walk away clean.my phone buzzed. Text from Mr. Kowalski, just confirming 7 p.m. See you then, 6:23 p.m. I had 37 minutes and $250 in chips. I needed $1,000 total, which meant I needed to turn $250 into $1,000 in half an hour. The math was simple but daunting. I'd need to quadruple my money in 37 minutes. That meant bigger bets, more risk, less margin for error that I placed a $100 chip in the betting circle. You sure? Linda asked. I'm sure. She dealt me a 12 against her 10. The worst possible situation in blackjack, a hand that could bust with any face card, against a dealer who probably had 20. Basic strategy said hit, but hitting meant risking everything on a single card that I thought about Craig. The confident guy in the expensive suit who'd ignored basic strategy and walked away with $1,800. Maybe. The books and forums and strategy charts were just another way to convince yourself you had control over something that was fundamentally random. Hit. I said 0.9. 21. Winner. Nice hit, Linda said. Paying me $100. I was at $350. Still far from my goal, but trending in the right direction. I bet $150 on the next hand. Blackjack. Ace-King suited. Linda paid me $225. I was at $575 now, more than doubling my money in 2 hands. The rush was incredible. Pure validation that I'd been right to take risks, right to ignore the conservative approach that had gotten me nowhere. I bet $200 on the next hand. Why not? I was on a heater, the cards were cooperating, and I finally had momentum on my side. Bust. 16 against Linda's 7. Hit, with a $10, $3.75 left. Still plenty to work with, but the clock was ticking. 6:31 p.m. I bet $300. Nearly everything I had left, but if I won, I'd be at $675. One more good hand after that, and I'd have my $1,000. Linda dealt me a 19. Excellent hand. She was showing a 6. Perfect bust card for the dealer. She flipped her whole card. 5. 11 total. Then drew a jack. 20-1. My $300 disappeared. I stared at my last $75 in chips, trying to process what had just happened. In 3 hands, I'd gone from feeling invincible to being almost broke again. The heater had lasted exactly long enough to make me believe in it. Take a break, Linda said gently. Get some air, maybe grab something to eat. I'm fine, I said, placing my last $75 on the table, but I wasn't fine. I was the opposite of fine. My phone was buzzing. Bank fraud alert. I stepped away from the table to answer it, leaving my last $75 in chips with Linda. The automated system wanted to verify recent ATM withdrawals at Riverside Casino. Yes, that was me. Yes, those were legitimate transactions. But standing there in the middle of the casino floor, listening to the mechanical voice confirm my financial destruction. The word legitimate felt like a joke that I'd withdrawn $800 from my accounts. Money that was supposed to pay rent, buy groceries, keep my phone connected. Money I'd promised myself I'd never touch except for real emergencies. Now it was scattered across Linda's chip rack like confetti from a very expensive party. When I sat back down, Linda had arranged my chips into a neat stack. $75. 3 green chips. The physical representation of how far I'd fallen from my original plan. Everything okay? She asked. Bank stuff, I said. Just checking on some transfers. Another lie. I was getting good at them. I placed all 3 chips in the betting circle. $75. My entire remaining bankroll riding on a single hand. If I won, I'd have $150. If I lost, I'd have nothing. Linda dealt me a 20. King of hearts, queen of spades. The best possible hand short of blackjack. She was showing a 5. Perfect situation for the player. Dealer would have to hit. And hitting on a 5 meant a high chance of busting. I felt a surge of confidence. This was it. The universe finally giving me the break I deserved after hours of bad luck. 20 versus 5. Mathematics on my side. Linda flipped her whole card. 6. 11 total. She drew a card from the shoe and placed it next to her 11. 10 of clubs. 21. House wins, she said quietly to my 3 chips joined the hundreds of others I'd lost over the past 5 hours. I sat at the empty spot, staring at the felt, trying to understand how perfect basic strategy and correct mathematical decisions had led me to this moment. I'm sorry, Linda said. I know that's frustrating. Frustrating. Like I'd missed a bus or gotten a parking ticket. Not like I'd just lost my entire life savings and guaranteed my eviction in the process. I checked the time. 6:52 p.m. 8 minutes until I was supposed to meet Mr. Kowalski with $1,000 cash. I walked toward the exit in a daze. Past the slot machines and the sports book and the other blackjack tables where people were still playing their systems and chasing their dreams. At the front door, I stopped and looked back at Linda's table. She was dealing to a new player, a middle-aged woman who looked nervous and excited. Fresh money, fresh hope, fresh certainty that this time would be different. I pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Rush hour traffic moved past on the highway. People heading home from work, back to apartments and houses and lives they could afford. My car sat in the same spot where I'd parked it 6 hours earlier, but everything else had changed. I'd walked into the casino as someone with a plan, someone who'd done his homework and understood the mathematics of advantage play. I walked out as someone who couldn't afford gas to get home. My phone rang. Mr. Kowalski. I let it go to voicemail. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to listen to Mr. Kowalski's voicemail. Alexander, it's 6:55. I'm waiting in my office like we agreed. Call me back. His voice sounded tired, disappointed, but not surprised. Like he'd been expecting this outcome all along. I tried calling him back, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. When he answered, I could hear the resignation in his voice before I even spoke. I'm sorry, I said. The payment didn't come through. There were complications with the bank transfer, and Alexander. He cut me off gently. Just stop. The silence stretched between us. I could hear papers shuffling in the background, probably the eviction documents he'd shown me this morning. I really thought you had it figured out, he said finally. When you sounded so confident about the payment, I thought maybe you'd landed a big client or your parents had helped out. But there was no payment, was there? I wanted to lie again, to spin another story about bank delays and processing errors. Instead, I just said, no. Where are you right now? I looked around the casino parking lot. Other cars coming and going. People starting their Friday night adventures or ending their workday gambling sessions. I made a mistake. The casino? The word hit me like a physical blow. How did he know? I've been doing this for 20 years, he said, reading my silence. I've seen tenants try everything. Lottery tickets, horse races, poker games. Always the same story. I just need to win enough to catch up. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. I thought I had a system. They all have systems. More silence. In the background, I could hear him typing on a computer keyboard. I'm filing the paperwork tonight, he said. Eviction proceedings start Monday morning. You've got the weekend to figure out where you're going. Mr. Kowalski, please. I can get the money. I just need, no. His voice was firm, but not unkind. I can't help you anymore, Alexander. And honestly, even if you showed up tomorrow with cash, I'd worry about where it came from. The line went dead that I sat in the growing darkness, watching other gamblers walk past my car. Some looked happy, clutching small winnings or riding the high of a good session. Others looked like I felt, hollow-eyed and moving too carefully, like they were afraid they might break if they stepped too hard. Across the street, Jerry's pawn and jewelry glowed under fluorescent lights. I could see movement inside, people trading possessions for cash, hope for temporary relief. The shop stayed open late on Fridays, catering to the casino crowd. My laptop was in my back seat. A MacBook Pro that I'd bought 2 years ago when freelance work was steady and the future looked bright. It contained every client file I had, every portfolio piece, every half-finished project that might represent future income. It was also worth about $800 retail. Maybe $400 to a pawn shop owner who dealt with desperate people every day. $400. Not enough to save my apartment, but enough to get back to Linda's table. Enough for one more shot at turning things around. I grabbed the laptop bag and walked across the street, telling myself this was just a temporary loan against future earnings. A bridge loan until I could get back on my feet. Jerry's bell chimed when I pushed through the door. Jerry looked exactly like someone who owned a pawn shop across from a casino should look. 60s. Overweight, wearing a Hawaiian shirt that had seen better decades. He sat behind bulletproof glass, surrounded by guitars, jewelry, power tools, and other artifacts of financial desperation. When I approached his window, he didn't even look up from his paperwork. "What VE you got?" he asked. I placed my laptop bag on the counter. "MacBook Pro, 2 years old, perfect condition." He sighed and looked up, studying my face with practiced disinterest. "Let me guess, you're gonna win it back tonight." "It's not like that. It's always like that." He gestured for me to pass the laptop through the security slot. "But hey, your funeral." Jerry examined the computer with the efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. He checked the screen, tested the keyboard, looked up the model number on his phone. The whole process took maybe 3 minutes. "For 100, he said. "It's worth 1,200 new. New was 2 years ago. This is now, and now it's worth 400. Take it or leave it." I thought about negotiating, but Jerry's expression suggested he'd heard every sob story and sales pitch in the book. Besides, 400 was exactly what I needed. Enough to get back in the game. Enough to make one serious run at recovery. "Deal," I said. He counted out 4 $100 bills and slid them through the slot along with a pawn receipt. 30 days to buy it back. 400 plus interest. After that, it's mine. "How much interest?" 20% monthly. "So if you want it back, it's 480. 20%. I'd learned enough about mathematics today to know that was a terrible deal. But 30 days was plenty of time to win back the money and reclaim my computer. 30 days was forever in gambling time. I walked back across the street with $400 in cash and a receipt that felt like a lifeline. The casino looked different now, brighter, more welcoming. The parking lot was fuller as the Friday evening crowd arrived. Date nights and celebration dinners. People with disposable income treating gambling like entertainment. I wasn't here for entertainment. I was here for salvation. Inside, the casino floor buzzed with weekend energy. More players at every table, more laughter from the slot machines, more drinks flowing from the cocktail waitresses. I found Linda's table, where she was dealing to a full game of 6 players. She looked up when I approached, and I saw something flicker across her face. Recognition, followed by what might have been concern. "Back again?" she asked. "One more session," I said, taking the only empty seat. "I've got some business to finish." Linda nodded but didn't smile. She dealt the next hand to the other players while I exchanged my 400 for chips. 16 green $25 chips, stacked neatly in front of me like little green promises. The other players were chattering about their days, their jobs, their weekend plans. Normal people living normal lives, treating their $100 losses like the cost of a dinner out. They had homes to go back to, rent payments that weren't in question, laptops that weren't sitting in pawn shops. I placed a $50 bet, double my original conservative approach. I didn't have time for $25 grinding. I needed to make serious money fast, before my luck could turn bad again. Linda dealt me a soft 18 against her 9. Basic strategy said hit, which felt counterintuitive but mathematically correct. I'd learned to trust the math. Hit, I said point 3. 21. Winner. Nice play, said the man to my right. Takes guts to hit 18. It wasn't guts. It was mathematics. Cold, reliable mathematics that was finally working in my favor again, that I was back in the game. The other players at Linda's table had no idea they were watching someone's life disintegrate in real time. To them, I was just another Friday night gambler, betting with confidence and playing by the book. They couldn't see that every chip represented gas money, grocery money. The difference between having a roof over my head and sleeping in my car, that I'd won the first hand with the soft 18, but the next 4 went against me. Basic strategy felt irrelevant when every loss cut deeper than the last. My 400 in chips became 300, then 250, then 200 as Linda's cards found ways to beat mine that felt personal. Rough stretch, said the woman next to me, a nurse still wearing scrubs from her hospital shift. Cards are cold tonight. Cards weren't cold or hot. Cards were random. But watching my chip stack shrink made it hard to remember that mathematics was supposed to be emotionless, that I increased my bet to $75. Bigger risk, bigger potential reward. If I was going to lose everything, I might as well lose it quickly. The bet paid off. Blackjack on the first hand, then a double-down winner on the second. I was back up to 350 and feeling like I'd found my rhythm again. There you go, Linda said, dealing the next round. Sometimes you just have to be patient. Patient. The word stung because I was anything but patient. I was desperate, reckless, betting money I'd borrowed against my own possessions. But Linda didn't know that. To her, I was just another player having a typical session. My phone buzzed with a text. I ignored it at first, focused on the cards, but it buzzed again. And again. During a bathroom break, I finally checked my messages. 3 texts from my friend Sarah, the one I'd blown off earlier in the week. Hey, saw your car at Riverside Casino. Everything okay? Seriously, text me back. I'm worried. If you need help, just call. We've all been there. We've all been there. What did that mean? Had Sarah been sitting where I was sitting, watching her life savings disappear one hand at a time? Had she pawned her possessions and made up stories about bank transfers and client payments? I typed back, I'm fine, just blowing off steam after a tough week. Another lie to add to the collection. When I returned to the table, Linda was dealing to 5 players instead of 6. The nurse had left, probably heading home to her normal life and her intact bank account. I took my seat and placed a $100 bet. You sure about that? Linda asked quietly. I'm sure, but I wasn't sure about anything. I was operating on pure momentum now. Each bet a desperate attempt to reverse the mathematics of loss that had defined my entire day. The hand was a disaster. 16 against Linda's 10, hit and bust with a 6. $100 gone in 30 seconds, down to 250. The pawn shop money disappearing as quickly as everything else had. That I thought about my laptop, sitting behind Jerry's bulletproof glass with a 20% monthly interest rate attached to it. In 30 days, if I couldn't buy it back, it would become his property. 3 years of work, gone forever, but 30 days was an eternity. Anything could happen in 30 days. I could land a big client, get caught up on rent, rebuild my entire financial life. All I needed was one good run to get back to even. I placed another $100 bet. Linda dealt me a 20. King-queen suited. Beautiful hand. Almost unbeatable. She was showing a 5. Perfect bust card for the dealer. I felt that familiar surge of confidence. The mathematical certainty that this was my hand, my moment, my turn for the universe to pay me back for hours of bad luck. Linda flipped her whole card. 6. 11 total. She drew from the shoe. 10 of diamonds. 20-1. My $100 bet joined the others in her chip rack. I was down to $150. The money from my laptop, the last portable asset I owned, melting away like everything else. The other players continued their casual conversation, talking about weekend plans and TV shows and the small concerns of people whose biggest worry was losing their entertainment budget. I envied them more than I could express. Linda announced her break when I was down to my last $100. Kevin will take over, she said, gathering her chips and nodding toward a younger dealer who'd been watching from nearby. I'll be back in 15. Kevin looked like he was maybe 25, with carefully styled hair, and the kind of confident energy that came from never having lost anything important. He settled behind the table and cracked his knuckles theatrically. "Let's have some fun," he said, shuffling the cards with unnecessary flourishes. The other players seemed to enjoy his energy, but I missed Linda's steady professionalism immediately. She dealt with quiet empathy, giving me space to make my own mistakes. Kevin felt like he was putting on a show. I placed my $100 in the betting circle. My last bet with pawn shop money, my final chance to turn things around before I had to face the reality of my situation. Kevin dealt fast, snapping cards across the felt with practiced precision. No small talk, no concern for player welfare, just efficient distribution of mathematical probability that I got a hard 16 against his 10. The worst possible situation in blackjack, a hand that could bust with any face card. Against a dealer who probably had 20. "Actions on you," Kevin said, tapping the felt in front of my cards. "Basic strategy," said Hit. The mathematics were clear, even if the emotional cost of busting felt unbearable. I'd spent the entire day following the system, trusting the percentages over my gut instincts. "Hit," I said. Kevin dealt me a 6. 22. "Bust." "Too bad," he said, pulling my last chips into his rack with casual indifference. That I sat at the empty spot for a moment, staring at the felt where my final bet had been. No more chips, no more chances, no more mathematical systems to trust. Just an empty space and a dealer who was already focused on the next hand. "You staying in?" Kevin asked. That I shook my head and stood up. The other players barely noticed my departure, absorbed in their own small dramas of wins and losses that wouldn't change their lives one way or the other. Walking away from the table felt like leaving a crime scene. Behind me, Kevin continued dealing to players who still had money, still had hope, still believed that the next hand might be the one that changed everything. I made it halfway to the exit before I turned around and walked back to Kevin's table. "I need a marker," I said. Kevin looked up from his dealing. "You'll have to talk to the pit boss about credit applications. But fair warning, they're pretty strict about approvals." The pit boss was a woman in her 40s wearing a navy blazer and the expression of someone who'd heard every sob story in the book. She listened to my request with professional patience, then pulled up something on her computer. "What's your annual income?" she asked. That I thought about lying, inflating my freelance earnings to sound more creditworthy. Instead, I told the truth. "It varies. Maybe 30,000 in a good year." She typed for a moment, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, but we can't extend credit without verifiable income and employment history. Company policy." "Please," I said. "I just need a small line. 500, maybe less." "I understand this is frustrating," she said, not unkindly. "But we have to protect both our customers and our business. There are resources available if you need help with gambling-related issues." She handed me a small card with phone numbers and website addresses. Gamblers Anonymous. Problem gambling hotlines. The kind of resources that were meant for other people, people who'd lost control. People who weren't like me. I pocketed the card and walked toward the exit, past the slot machines and the sports book and the cocktail waitresses serving drinks to people who could afford them. Outside, the Friday night crowd was arriving. Couples dressed for dinner, groups of friends starting their weekend celebrations. Normal people living normal lives, treating a casino visit like any other entertainment option. I sat in my car and tried to process what had just happened. In 6 hours, I'd lost my rent money, my emergency fund, and my laptop. I'd guaranteed my eviction, destroyed my credit, and pawned the tools I needed to earn a living. All because I believed that mathematics could overcome desperation. My phone battery was dying, and I didn't have a car charger. Just another small consequence of a day that had started with such confidence and certainty that I needed to call someone. But who? My parents, who'd be disappointed and worried. Sarah, who'd already seen my car in the casino parking lot. Mr. Kowalski, who'd made it clear that our business relationship was over. The casino's neon lights reflected off my windshield, promising jackpots and good times to people who still had money to lose. I started my car and drove home through Friday night traffic, wondering how I was going to explain any of this to anyone. My phone died completely as I pulled into my apartment complex. The building looked different in the dark, smaller, shabbier, like a place I was visiting rather than somewhere I lived. Temporary housing for someone whose real life was happening elsewhere. I climbed the 3 flights to my door and found another notice taped to it. This one was yellow instead of white, with "Final notice, printed in red letters across the top. Legal language about court proceedings and sheriff's departments and timelines that had already passed. Inside my apartment, the silence felt oppressive. No laptop humming on the kitchen table, no familiar weight in my messenger bag. Just empty space where my primary source of income used to be. I plugged my phone into the wall charger and waited for it to power up. 7 missed calls, a dozen text messages, notifications piling up like debris from a storm I'd been too distracted to notice. Most were from my parents. Mom's voice in the voicemails getting progressively more worried as the day went on. "Hi, honey, just checking in. Call me back when you get this. Alexander, it's Mom again. I'm starting to worry. Please call. Sweetie, I don't want to bother you, but it's not like you to not return calls. Just let me know you're okay." The last message was from Dad, his voice more direct. "Son, your mother's worried sick. Whatever's going on, we can help. Call us back." I should have called them immediately. Should have swallowed my pride, admitted my mistakes, asked for help. Instead, I sat on my couch and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out how to explain that their responsible, college-educated son had managed to destroy his life in a single afternoon. The other messages were from Sarah, checking in after seeing my car at the casino. From Mr. Kowalski, confirming that eviction proceedings would begin Monday. From a potential client who wanted to discuss a small logo project. Work I couldn't complete without my computer. I walked to my kitchen and opened the refrigerator. A half-empty carton of milk, some leftover Chinese takeout that was probably spoiled, a few condiments. The pantry wasn't much better. I hadn't been grocery shopping in weeks, living off whatever was already in the apartment and telling myself I'd restock once the Brennan marketing payment came through. The Brennan marketing payment that would never come. I made a mental inventory of my remaining assets. My car, which was paid off, but worth maybe $3,000 if I could find a buyer. Some furniture that might bring a few hundred at a yard sale. Clothes, books, kitchen appliances, the detritus of a normal life that suddenly felt like items in an estate sale. My laptop had been the valuable thing, the tool that generated income and connected me to clients and contained 3 years of portfolio work. Now it was sitting in Jerry's pawn shop, accruing 20% monthly interest like a Financial Times bomb, that I thought about the gambler's anonymous card the pit boss had given me. Resources for people with gambling problems. But I didn't have a gambling problem. I'd had a desperate situation that required a desperate solution. The fact that it hadn't worked didn't make me an addict, did it? I pulled out my phone and searched for problem gambling signs. The results were uncomfortably specific. Lying about gambling activities. Chasing losses with bigger bets. Borrowing money to gamble. Pawning possessions to continue playing. I'd done all of those things in a single day, but it was different for me. I'd had a plan, a system, a mathematical approach that should have worked. I wasn't some degenerate feeding quarters into slot machines. I was an educated person who'd made calculated decisions based on research and probability. The rationalization felt hollow even as I made it. Outside my window, I could see the Route 47 bus stop. Even at 10 p.m. on a Friday, buses were still running, still carrying people back and forth between the city and the casino, between hope and disappointment, between having money and having stories about where the money went. I had enough cash in my wallet for bus fare, maybe $5 in quarters and crumpled bills. Not enough to gamble with, but enough to get there. To sit in the casino and think about what had gone wrong, what I could have done differently. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. "Seriously worried about you. If you're in trouble, just call. No judgment. No judgment." Easy to say, harder to believe. How do you explain to someone that you'd thrown away everything you owned chasing a mathematical certainty that turned out to be an illusion? I typed back, "Thanks. Just dealing with some work stuff. I'll be fine." Another lie. They were getting easier. I looked around my apartment one more time. At the eviction notices and the empty laptop bag and the refrigerator that contained more hope than food. Monday morning, the sheriff would come. I'd have to be gone by then, taking whatever I could carry and leaving the rest behind. But that was Monday. This was Friday night, and the casino was still open. I didn't go back to the casino that night. Instead, I sat in my apartment until sunrise, making lists of things I needed to do and people I needed to call. Practical tasks for someone whose life had just collapsed. Finding temporary housing. Recovering work files. Figuring out how to restart a career without a computer. By Saturday afternoon. The reality was setting in. I had maybe $20 in cash, no available credit, and 48 hours before eviction proceedings began. I needed help, and I needed it from the only people who might actually provide it. I called my parents. Mom answered on the first ring. Alexander. Oh, thank God. I've been so worried. Hi, Mom. Sorry I didn't call back yesterday. It's been complicated. Are you okay? You sound different. I looked around my apartment, at the eviction notices and the empty spaces where my computer used to be. I'm in some trouble. Financial trouble. The silence stretched for a moment. Then Dad's voice joined the call. What kind of trouble, son? I told them everything. The lost client, the unpaid invoice, the eviction notice. I told them about the casino, about the system I'd thought would save me, about the laptop sitting in a pawn shop across from the blackjack tables. When I finished, the silence was deafening. How much do you need? Dad asked finally. The rent is $2,400. Plus I need to get my laptop back, which is another $480 with interest. $3,000, Mom said quietly. I know it's a lot. I know I screwed up. I thought I had it figured out. My parents' voices over the phone carried both love and finality. They agreed to send money one last time, but only if I got help and moved back home to Sacramento. At 28, returning to my childhood bedroom felt like failure, but failure was exactly where I stood. I packed the essentials, clothes, books, my laptop once I reclaimed it from the pawn shop. On my way out of town, I passed the casino where everything had unraveled. Its neon signs promised jackpots to the next desperate believer in a system. My parents' $3,000 wire paid my landlord and bought back my laptop. But the shame weighed heavier than the debt. Sacramento meant starting over in the same room where teenage me once dreamed of independence. The trophies and movie posters mocked me, reminders of someone who thought he'd figure life out. Dad found the Gambler's Anonymous card I'd shoved aside. I should probably call, I admitted. He simply nodded. That night, we talked about my blackjack system. I explained probability charts, house edge math, the logic I had convinced myself proved I was different from other gamblers. Dad listened carefully, then said, the math is sound, in theory. But casinos aren't theory. They're businesses. They win because people like you believe they're the exception. The next day, I dialed the GA hotline. A kind voice directed me to a meeting. The fluorescent-lit community center smelled of coffee and carpet. The people there weren't the caricatures I'd imagined, but ordinary folks, neighbors, co-workers, parents. Bill, who'd lost a house and marriage to poker, put it simply, the only thing I was smart at was rationalizing bad decisions. I shared my story. Others nodded knowingly. Patricia told me about her own failed sports betting system, and Bill reminded us, systems always stop working. That's the Real House edge, psychological. Afterward, Patricia told me I was lucky to hit rock bottom so soon. Some of us take multiple trips to the bottom before we figure it out. Maybe you're smarter than that. Back home, I worked on a small logo project. Honest work, if not glamorous. My parents hovered, cautious with their trust, but their presence felt grounding. I pinned the GA meeting schedule next to my high school graduation photo, two versions of myself staring back. The hopeful kid and the humbled adult. 3 weeks later, I left my old apartment for good. The furniture was gone, rooms echoing. I found the GA card on the fridge, a silent witness to every morning I'd ignored it. With my parents' help, I packed everything into a small U-Haul. Proof of how much my life had shrunk on the drive back to Sacramento. Mom asked the hard question. Do you think you'll gamble again? My honest answer was that I didn't know. I hoped not. But wanting and doing weren't the same. Addiction was about control, or the illusion of at home. I opened my laptop and began to write. I typed about walking into Riverside Casino with $847 in certainty, about pawning 3 years of work, about calling my parents from the parking lot in shame. I wrote to remember how easily confidence had turned into catastrophe. The truth was simple. The math had been right, but my belief in control was wrong. The casino didn't beat me with rigged games. It beat me with patience, with my own desperation disguised as logic. Now, I attend GA meetings, work small jobs, and live with my parents. My future looks smaller but more real. Predictable routines, once boring, now feel like virtues. I keep the pawn shop receipt in my wallet beside the GA card. Daily reminders of how quickly life can collapse and how slowly it can be rebuilt. It isn't much, but it's enough to start.